Hi, this is Maggie. In this video, we're going to talk about the factor data type and sorting data in R. I recommend that you open RStudio and work along with me and play around and experiment as we go. That's the best way to learn. The factor data type is used for storing categorical data, data that can be divided into groups, such as political party affiliation, preferred type of exercise, food group, or continent. For each of these groups, there is a designation, such as Democrat, Republican, Independent, and maybe other for political party affiliation, or Africa, Asia, Europe, North America, Oceania, and South America for continents with human populations. So for each observation that includes a categorical variable, the value for that variable will be one of these designations, and those are the only values allowed. As an example, I've downloaded our World in Data's COVID dataset. There's a link in the description. I looked at a lot of their datasets for data that I thought had a natural categorical variable, and this is the first one I found. I have a very short script here called factors and sorting that loads this dataset into a variable called COVID. And you can see when I run it that there are 258,054 observations of 67 variables. Each observation represents data for a country on a specific date. The column that is a categorical variable, and should be a factor in my opinion, is continent. I did not specify that when I loaded the data in, so if we type strCovid and scroll through all of the columns, we can see that this is character data. Let's change the way we read the data in to read that column in as categorical data. And this time, rather than look at the documentation, I'm going to show you an easy way to get the right syntax in RStudio, and that's by using the Import Dataset item up in the Environment tab. I choose From Text Reader, and then use the Browse button to find the file. I find it and open it, and Read CSV takes a guess at the data type of the columns. Now I can see that it's guessed character for continent, and I want that to be factor, so I'm going to click on the menu and choose factor from the menu. Another dialog comes up and asks for a comma-separated list of factors, so I'll type them in alphabetical or lexicographical order. So Africa, comma, Asia, comma, Europe, North America, Oceania, South America, and press OK. And it rereads the data with that type. And it also shows me the code in the code preview window. So I can copy it from there and paste it into my script and edit it. For example, I can change the name of the resulting data frame, as readCSV is using the name of the file to name the data frame. Let's save and run that. Now, over in the Environment tab, let's click the arrow next to COVID data and take a look at continent. Notice it says it's a factor with 6 levels, and it has them in an elided list. Africa, Asia, ... And then it shows the first few values. The values are the indices of the factors. So we can see in the view that the continent values in the first rows are all Asia, corresponding to the second factor, and in the data we see 2, 2, 2, etc. This is more efficient than storing each individual value as character, because the text is stored only once in the levels part of the factor. We can see the levels of a factor variable by using the levels function. So if I write in the console levels open paren COVID data $continent close paren, R responds by showing me the levels vector. Let's create a smaller table so we don't have quite so much data to look at. I downloaded this table on February 17, 2023, and the data goes from March 13, 2020, around when lockdowns for the pandemic began, up to February 16, 2023. Let's extract the rows or observations for just February 16, 2023, and let's select just a few columns as well. And if you do that, you'll see there are some rows or observations with NA values that represent data for entire continents or income categories. So we'll also exclude all NA values in the continent column. That looks like February 16th is assigned the value of COVID data, open bracket, COVID data $date equals, quote, 2023-02-16, quote, and, or ampersand, not is.na, COVID data $continent, comma, C 23458. So when we're selecting, we can select based on more than one criterion by joining our criteria with the ampersand, meaning logical and. The exclamation point is not, and is.na returns true if a value is an NA value. So this will select only the date we want and no rows that contain NA values in the continent variable, and then just the columns we're interested in. And we'll view that, and you can see we're down to 218 observations. That's one observation for each of 218 countries on February 16, 2023. Now, I'm not going to discuss factors more than this at this time, but I do want to illustrate that because they represent categorical data, they can be used to group data into categories. So let's make a plot. If I write plot, open paren, and then February 16th, $continent for the x-axis, and February 16th, total cases for the y-axis. The plot function is able to select an appropriate plot for categorical data because the continent column is a factor variable, and it produces a box and whisker plot for me of the total cases by continent. It would not be able to produce a plot if the column were still character data. And we see that in the Plots tab. One crazy outlier in North America is making this plot difficult to read, though. I think we could find better ways to look at this data, such as looking at the total cases per million variable rather than just the total cases variable. I hope you have RStudio open and are working along with me. Try that for practice and see if you get a more readable plot. That's column 11 in the original data frame. Now let's talk about sorting a data frame or ordering it according to a criterion. So for example, suppose we want to see the countries in order according to the total cases per million. I'm first going to create that data frame I suggested you create by copying and pasting the code that creates our February 16th data frame, but substitute 11 for 5, and I'll call that Feb16 alt. Now in the console, I'm going to write sort, open paren, Feb16 alt, $, total cases per million. And that's interesting. We can see the numbers in ascending order, but it's not really helpful for doing much more than that. I don't know which country, for example, has 0.038 cases per million, or which country has over 720,000. What's really more useful is getting the indices of those values in order, because we know that we can use indices to extract rows from a data frame. So instead of sort, let's see what order Feb16 $ total cases per million gives us. It gives us the indices of the rows in the data frame, ordered by total cases per million. So the element at index 146 is the one with the lowest cases per million, and the element at index 52 is the one with the highest. Let's look at those rows by typing Feb16 alt, open bracket, C, 146, 52, comma, to show us a data frame with just those two rows and all columns. So North Korea and Cyprus. And of course, we must remember that not all countries are reporting their cases in the same way or at all. Now, maybe you can see that we can use the entire vector of indices to create a new data frame of the rows now sorted according to the order of the total cases per million column. Let's write in our script ordered Feb16 is assigned the value Feb16 alt, open square bracket, order Feb16 alt $ total cases per million, comma, and then view that data frame and run the script. And there's North Korea at the top. And if we scroll down, we can see the total cases per million variable increasing, and there's Cyprus at the bottom. Now, let's pull that apart a little, just to ensure it makes sense. We're indexing into February 16 alt, our data frame with the February 16th data, including the total cases per million variable. And we're going to specify, in square brackets, the rows and columns that we want. For rows, we're going to pass in the vector of indices, which is the ordered total cases per million variable. Remember, we can select out any rows according to a criteria, or just concatenate together some indices and select those rows. Here we're selecting all of the rows, but in a new order. And then a comma, and all of the columns. So we leave the columns specifier blank to get all of the columns, and then close square bracket. So that's a little introduction to factors and reordering a data frame by a variable's values, which gives you some interesting data and fun new tools to play with. The code, as always, will be uploaded to my GitHub repository with a link in the description. I hope you found this helpful. I suggest you practice with this by downloading this data, which has tons of interesting variables, from ourworldindata.org, reading it in, and then ordering it according to variables you find interesting. Have fun with it.